Welcome to Tanuki Fishing Webinar. Today, we continue the fundamental of Tenkara rod fishing with my Sment. Part 4, casting. Here's Matt. Are you ready?
All right, so we're going to move on here and talk about techniques. So I feel like we've covered kind of the basics and the basic ideas behind the equipment. And so now we're moving on to the part that we do beyond the choosing the equipment into how we manipulate the rod, how we cast it, how we move the fly, how we land the fish. And so, yeah, let's roll on with that. So we're going to talk about just the basic cast first and foremost. And please, enjoy the high level quality art here that I put together in order to illustrate the casting. But basically, when we start out, we're going to grasp the rod with your index finger extended on the rod. If that doesn't feel comfortable to you, fine. But the reason we want to do that is that actually lines the bones in your arm up and your wrist up with the rod in a way that make it a lot easier to control the rod and to keep it from whipping around. Like I wish, like someday I'm going to make a video. I wish I had one ready to show you of the difference in just arm motions between whether or not you extend your finger and don't. That being said, that's probably the best practice. But if that's not comfortable for you, people have any number of reasons why that may not be comfortable: injuries, arthritis, what have you. Hold it any way you have to. In some cases, you can basically hold it in your hand with your thumb, basically up on the grip instead of your index finger. There's actually, I'm forgetting his name, but there's a well-known Tenkara master that fishes that way. So, don't think that if you can't extend your finger, you're never going to be Tenkara rod fishing well. There's plenty of people that do. That is the best practice, but it's not a requirement. So, in regards to that, though, we'll grasp the rod with the index finger extended, hold the rod in a relaxed manner that still allows you to control the rod, and start with the line held out in front of you at about a 45-degree angle with the line hanging free. From there, we're going to begin the cast by drawing the tip up and backwards by flexing your forearm and wrist. You're going to keep your elbow tucked in close to your torso. A lot of you folks that are coming from conventional fly fishing are going to be doing these big arm motions, and that's going to be about like 10,000% more motion and energy than you need to actually get a good cast out there. So try to keep that elbow in close, held comfortably near your torso. You're going to get up to about the 12 o'clock position and stop abruptly. You're going to pause briefly to allow the rod to load. And then depending on the rod and line, you may feel actually the weight shift. Depending on what I'm fishing, and I'm very familiar and comfortable with a lot of the rigs I fish now, so on most of even my very, very lightweight rods and lines, I can feel the weight shift a little bit as the rod loads, and that tells me that it's time to launch it forward. On the forward snap, we're going to snap that rod tip forward in a smooth and consistent motion. Keep that elbow close to your body. It doesn't need to move at all for this cast. Then, to stop the cast, end it, we're going to check it abruptly at a 45-degree angle. You're not going to drop the rod tip as you would with a conventional fly rod. And the reason we don't do that is going back to the length of the rod that we talked about earlier in the equipment section. The idea of the length of the rod is to keep the line off the water, right? So if we drop the rod tip like we did on a conventional rod, we would actually be pretty much dropping all of the line down onto the water, and we'd be blowing that Tenkara advantage we're looking to create with that long rod and a high. I don't know if you guys can see my, can you see my cursor? Okay.
Yes.
So yeah, so this position, like really remember this. This is important. This is where the rod tip needs to be in most cases in order to keep that line off the water. And so we're going to check at that 45 degrees, and then that line is just going to shoot straight out that way. Now, when we get to the end here, like I've got this weird thing where I don't have myself on video very much because I've done a lot of photographing and videoing other Tenkara anglers, but I do have some casting of some very skilled Tenkara anglers, some videos that I'd be happy to show at the end here. I can throw up some miscellaneous stuff. But unfortunately, since I'm always the guy behind the camera, I typically don't have any footage of me doing this right now. So does anybody have any questions about that basic cast? I'm just going to give you a quick pause. If you got one, go ahead and type it in. If not, we'll just go ahead and move on.
And then also next Wednesday, I want to feel in next Wednesday, we'll have Robert Worthing. If you're interested in casting, have Robert Worthing. He's going to present about modern casting. So for you all, just check it out.
Yeah, Rob is an exceptionally skilled Tenkara rod angler. And as far as advanced casting, I honestly, like, I've only ever seen one or two other humans that can cast the way Rob can. And you will learn a lot. Rob's a great teacher. He's got a lot to share. And it's definitely worth it to study with Rob and take it beyond these fundamentals into some more refined techniques. That being said, let's move on a little bit here. So additional tips for casting: stay relaxed and keep your motions smooth and consistent. The more you tense up, and that could be just in your hand if you've got like a death grip on the grip, you know, like relax. The more you tense up, the harder it's going to be for that energy to transfer through the rod into the line to the fly. And no one wants to be all tense on the water all day. So yeah, chill out. Don't overpower your cast. Practice until you find the minimum amount of energy you need to throw the line and present the fly. Typically, putting too much force into a cast will spoil it. I can't stress that enough. But like really finding that sweet spot that is just enough energy to deliver is what you're looking for. That gets a little bit iffy when it gets windy, when you're trying to perform subtle manipulations and precise control over the fly, and the wind is pushing the rod around. But yeah, like under power as much as you can. Under power and work up to it. And you'll get much better technique out of less power and finding that sweet spot than you will out of trying to like cone in that thing all day. For increased control of your cast, you can move your grip position up to the top of the cork. For example, instead of holding it in the middle, you're going to put the palm of the grip really pretty much up at the very top of the grip, and your index finger up on the blank, about 3 or 4 inches up on the blank. And from there, you'll get increased control over both your cast and your fly control. So when I really need to get, basically, when I feel like I need to get better accuracy and control, I'm going to move my hand up the grip to the top. If I want more sensitivity and strike detection, if I'm fishing subsurface, I'm going to move my grip to the very bottom, where I've got the actual bottom of the rod kind of palmed, and my index finger is up on the grip itself. But that gives me a little bit of extra length, and that extra length gives me a little bit of extra strike detection, in my experience. The other thing I've experienced is the biggest problem that anglers who have spent time fishing with a conventional fly rod and reel have when they're trying to learn the Tenkara cast is training themselves to not drop the rod tip. Now, if you've been fishing conventional style for the last year or 2 or 10 or 20, you've gone through tens of thousands of muscle memory repetitions of dropping that tip at the end of your cast. And it's going to take some concerted focus to train through that. It can be overcome. It typically takes about 10 minutes with most of the anglers that I work with in order to do it, but you've really got to focus on that. And if that's something that you can't get control over, yeah, you're still going to catch fish, but you're not going to catch as much fish, and you're going to lose out on a lot of the potential control that you have available to you in the system. So definitely keep that tip high at the end of the cast and while you're drifting. We'll get that in a moment. Yeah, we just hit that already. Check the cast at the 45-degree angle and maximize the rod's ability to keep your line off the water. Once you become comfortable with the basic mechanics of the cast, it's easy to begin to apply it to less common casting angles. Be patient, spend time practicing, and you'll be throwing great casts soon. The thing that you're going to realize eventually is that any cast is simply drawing a line in the air between 2 points with the tip of the rod, and that the line and the fly will continue to travel in the same direction as the line that you just drew in the air. So that tip, and we're going to talk about that in a little bit, that tip position, that tip control, what you do up at the tip is the vast majority of the amount of control over your cast and your fly. So let's talk about what I think is the most critical concept in Tenkara rod fishing, and that is line tension. That is a properly tensioned line. And, you know, we'll start out simple here. What does a properly tensioned line look like? On the left, you see that we've got the rod extended. We've stopped our cast, checked it at 45 degrees. The line has shot out. And at the moment that the fly hits the water, we have essentially a firmness in the line that connects us to the fly. On the right, you can see that there's slack in the line, and that's what we're looking to avoid. The more slack in the line, the less control and information that we're able to get as anglers. So we want that line tension. Why? Properly tensioned line transmits information to the angler. It lets you detect strikes. It gives you feedback on the speed of the current, the direction, and the way everything is flowing. If you've got slack in the line, you won't be able to feel a fish nibbling on the hook. You won't be able to feel the environmental factors that are going on the other end of your system, and you're going to lose out on that. Those are valuable, valuable tools. Properly tensioned line also resists pulling force, which enables clean and definitive hook sets. It transfers motion from the angler to the fly, all the way down through the rod, the line, and the tippet. And that enables you to control the depth and direction, and allows you to control the movements and techniques that you're using. If you don't have slack, you don't have control. Excuse me, if you have slack, you do not have control of the fly, and you do not have communication with the fly. I'm sure, like, you know, most of y'all are at least my age, so you remember back in the day when we used to build those walkie-talkies out of soup cans. And in order for the soup can walkie-talkie to work, you had two cans and you had a long string stretched between them. And that string had to be tensioned properly in order to transfer the vibrations in between the cans. And a Tenkara rod fishing system is pretty much the same thing, minus the soup cans. It relies on that tension in the line in order for vibration or control or movement to travel in either direction. So again, this is a critical thing here in Tenkara rod fishing. If you don't have line tension, you're not fishing essentially. You might as well be out of the water. We're gonna come back to that one. Okay, yeah, so let's talk about drift. So, you know, we're doing this drift and everyone's talked, you know, I'm sure people are aware of the dead drift, which is just a dead float through the water at the pace of the current, which is typically one of the first things that we look for. But let's talk about aspects of what a good drift is and how long you can hold it. So a good drift is a drift where you are able to maintain line tension and control over the fly. That's it. It's gone where you want it to. You've got your line tension, so you're in communication and control with the fly, and you let it go. And in that case, basically, I mean, depending on how long you can maintain the conditions of a good drift, you can maintain a drift for a very long time. What I've found is that on faster water, I continue the drift as long as it looks good. And folks, I'll tell you, if I'm fishing upstream, I'm fishing that section upstream in front of me and then downstream past me as a complete drift, if I can. On faster water, as long as it's good, I leave it in. On slow, clear water, I will not pull a cast directly out of the water or a drift out of the water. I will float it out of the target zone before I recast. Because it may not have landed or floated naturally, but it jumping into the air and flying off into space is definitely the most unnatural thing it could possibly do. So rather than disturb the target zone, we'll float that out of the target zone. But typically, maintain your cast as long as you can maintain the quality. Maintain that drift as long as you can maintain the quality of your drift. Let's talk about fly control. Fly control includes the art of moving the fly when and how you want to. That also includes the art of not moving the fly when and how you want to. So basically, we want the fly to be behaving in a controlled manner that we are controlling. When we combine awareness of environmental factors like current speed and overhead cover and just everything that's going on around us with maintaining a proper high tip position and keeping line tension, you can get precise control over the location and behavior of the fly to within inches, to within very, very small tolerances on the water. But you've got to make sure that the tip control is there, the line tension is there, and that you're aware of how that is being applied to the terrain and situation you're fishing. I'd keep in mind that starting depth of a fly is first and foremost a function of where the tip stops in the cast, because a fly can only sink as deep as it's given enough line and tippet and system to do so. So if I stop my tip a little higher and then the line extends and the fly hits the water, at that point, ideally, that is the only thing touching the water. Ideally, I've maintained enough line tension that I have control, that fly touches the water, gains contact with the surface, and I'm able to keep that tip high and move it with the drift in order to ensure that the tippet and the line stay off the water during the drift. And that's when you get deadly, deadly days on the water. When you get those fly-only drifts, man, the fish can't resist that. He ain't gonna know any better. And yeah, I mean, fly only means you're not disturbing the surface with your tippet. It means you're not disturbing the surface with your line. It means that the fish is only getting eyeballs on that fly, and on the other end of that fly is you, who's in complete control of how it is drifting and behaving. And then with that line tension, you can snap up that clean hook set and bring the fish in. But those are all aspects of fly control. Consider that high tip position in order to create line tension. If there is one thing that you walk away from that is a fundamental thing to know about how to be successful in catching fish with Tenkara rods, it's that. That is it right there. That is the goal. So we'll move on a little bit into landing the fish. We're going to play the fish towards you until you can grasp the line with your free hand. Once you have the line firmly in control, transfer that grasp to the hand that is holding the rod. Repeat the process until the fish is close enough to land it. Too easy. Give me a second here. I'm going to bring a video up. Okay, so you can all hear me here. This is a video I put together from last year's Oni Tenkara school, and it's a little bit over 3 minutes long. But you're going to see him catch some fish here, and this is, in my opinion, and the opinion of many other people, the greatest living practitioner of this style of fishing on earth. So there's really no better person to demonstrate these things. Watch the left side of the screen, or the left bank, a little bit further down. You'll see some good, you can see his line and his fly here. And then here's him bringing the fish in. Boop, boop, boop. He's taking his time, but everybody see how he's just kind of doing hand over hand. And it takes a little while to get used to, but once you get the learning curve and it becomes muscle memory, it goes very quickly. Yeah, if you're watching that left side of the screen, hopefully you can see that fish come up and hit that thing. You're getting a good look at the tip position control and the drift control that I'm talking about also. Now you'll notice also that he's given this fish a little bit of time. And the various fish that you've seen caught in this video, some of them come in fast, some of them don't. Some of them, like this one, I believe, gets downstream from him and kind of gets a little bit further away, and we ended up having someone else net for him. But you'll see that there's varying levels of control, and okay, let's talk about how he's kind of taking the rod sideways parallel to the water and how he's flipping that from side to side. What that does is that as the hook pulls against the fish, that confuses the fish as to what direction it wants to run, essentially. So he's working it into shallower, calmer water, because that's relatively fast, deep water there, so it can be netted. And then I think this next one is just a really good example of being very delicate and careful with getting the fish in, because you're going to see him move it into calmer water, and you're going to see him really kind of just, bam, there you go. But when he gets this fish in a little closer, you can see how delicately he's hand lining it. I'm not unconvinced he wasn't kind of showing off a little bit, but okay, there we go. Okay, we should have the screen back up. So basically, we've come to the end of what I consider to be the bare bones fundamentals of Tenkara rod fishing. I'm sure that there's unanswered questions. I'm happy to answer any other questions y'all may have. I suspect there may have even been a topic or two that I wanted to cover that I completely forgot to throw in there. So by all means, please, let me know what else I should have covered or could have covered for you there. And, feel free to launch any other questions you may have. Any questions about Tenkara rod fishing, whether or not I covered it, I'm happy to go into to detail about for you tonight. Got a couple questions here. First of all, David Christensen, I noticed some casters go a little beyond 12 o'clock. What does that do to your line? David, I think that's probably just kind of the little differences in between anglers. I think as long as the angler is able to operate the system, then little variances. Like I can't think of anything in particular that does, other than it kind of throws off where your back cast is going, but that may just be the way you cast. Like not everybody stops at exactly 12 o'clock, and not everybody stops at exactly 45 degrees. Like I'm sure if we had the instruments, we could probably identify how off various people are. But I don't believe that a little bit is going to be anything other than like the normal variance you see in between individual styles. Stevie Lee wants to know, if you are casting longer line, would you stop earlier, and I think you're asking like on the forward cast. Yes, and that's where that whole thing with being familiar and comfortable with your system and experimenting slowly comes in, because that's how you find that stuff out. Is like, wow, I'm casting this longer line and it's not landing quite where I want it to. At that moment that you notice that it's not landing where you want it to, then you start making some adjustments. Maybe I'll stop a little earlier. Maybe I'll stop a little later. Maybe I'll, do this. Who knows? But yeah, I think that's something that you would have to kind of train into, Stevie. Gary, see, I knew that there, man, Gary, I was trying to answer your question and I accidentally clicked the wrong button. Can you submit it again, please? Sorry about that, man. Okay, when trying to cast level line longer than the rod, I'm starting to crack the whip. So that's, yes, it is timing. It's timing, and it's a little bit too much force. So Masami would tell you that you want to avoid that whip cracking sound, and you're probably, I'm thinking, putting too much power into it, Gary. So try to slow it down a little bit. Same motions, same mechanics, but slow it down a little bit and power it down a little bit. And I think that'll smooth it out and take that, that like aggressive level off of what you're getting out of your cast.
I think you also need to drop down the elbow too.
Yes. Keep that elbow tucked in too. Thanks, Lauren.
There's a question from Marsha Morris. She have been giving advice to put the index finger on top, on the side of the rod. Does it affect the cast?
A little bit, yeah. Like, I can feel a difference in a cast from if I'm holding the rod from the bottom or from the top. It certainly does. And it's something that you learn to adjust to. Like typically, if I'm fishing from the bottom of the rod, I typically have to put a little bit more snap into it. It doesn't crack it, but I typically, just because of where my hand position is, it transfers the energy to the rod differently. But that, again, experiment with that. Put your hand in different positions on the grip and cast and see how that feels for you. See if you can generate increased accuracy, increased precision, decreased power, like a very, very